The first thing Captain Daniel Harper noticed about her was that she stood a half step behind the others, not because she was timid, but because she was observing. Most new arrivals tried too hard to be seen, shoulders back, chins lifted, boots planted like flags. She didn't do that. She watched. Her eyes moved from the perimeter fence to the watchtower, then to the worn edges of the motor pool, and finally to him. Just for a second, long enough to measure him. Then she looked away. Daniel had been in command long enough to trust his instincts, and his instinct told him she didn't belong there. At least, not in that unit. The forward operating base was a pressure cooker. Long deployments, unpredictable terrain, and missions that shifted from routine patrols to chaos in seconds. He needed people who fit cleanly into the machine, not quiet enigmas who made him uneasy. "All right," he said, clapping his hands once as the dust swirled around their boots. "Listen up. We got a new rotation joining us today. You already know the rules. You watch each other's backs, you follow orders, and you don't freelance." A few soldiers nodded. Some barely hid their boredom. Daniel's gaze returned to her. "Lieutenant Emma Carter," the sergeant announced. "Transferred in this morning." Daniel took a step forward. "Lieutenant," he said, voice clipped. "You're assigned to logistics support for now. We'll see how you do before we put you anywhere near the line." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, maybe or disappointment, but her face remained calm. "Yes, sir," she said. That should have been the end of it. But something about the way she said it bothered him. No defensiveness, no relief. Just acceptance, as if she'd expected it. Over the next few days, Daniel noticed things he didn't want to notice. Emma Carter asked smart questions during briefings, the kind that showed she was thinking 3 steps ahead. She memorized routes faster than anyone else. When equipment failed, she didn't call for help right away. She fixed it. Quietly. The rest of the unit noticed too. "She's sharp," Sergeant Mike Reynolds said one evening as they reviewed patrol footage. "She's untested," Daniel replied. "And this isn't the place for experiments." Reynolds studied him. "With respect, sir, you might want to rethink that." Daniel didn't respond. He learned the hard way that good intentions didn't stop bullets. Experience did. And Emma Carter didn't look like someone who had seen enough of the real thing. The incident that changed everything began like any other mission briefing. A routine patrol through a valley they'd traveled dozens of times before. Intelligence reports were thin, but nothing suggested serious trouble. Daniel outlined the plan, assigning teams and routes. When Emma raised her hand, the room went quiet. "Sir," she said carefully, "permission to ask a question." Daniel exhaled. "Go ahead." "The Eastern Ridge," she said, pointing to the map. "We've never sent anyone up there during these patrols. If someone wanted a clear line of sight on the convoy, that's where they'd be." A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel felt irritation rise in his chest. "Lieutenant, we've run this route for months. If there was a threat—" "With respect, sir," she interrupted, still calm, "patterns change. People adapt." Daniel's jaw tightened. He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head. "Step back, sweetie," he said, the words slipping out sharper than he intended. "Let the people with experience handle this." The room went silent. Emma didn't react. She simply nodded and sat back, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But Daniel felt a strange twist in his stomach. He told himself it was nothing. Stress. Fatigue. The convoy rolled out at dawn. The valley was quiet, too quiet. Dust hung in the air, and the hum of engines felt louder than it should have. Daniel scanned the ridges as they moved, his earlier confidence eroding with every passing minute. Then the first explosion hit. The lead vehicle vanished in a cloud of fire and debris, flipping onto its side as the shockwave tore through the convoy. Gunfire erupted from the ridges, precise and relentless. "Contact! Contact!" Someone shouted over the radio. Daniel barked orders, adrenaline surging as he tried to piece together the chaos. They were pinned down, boxed in by terrain that offered little cover. The Eastern Ridge, Emma's Ridge, came alive with muzzle flashes. Another explosion rocked the convoy, closer this time. They were losing control. "Fall back!" Daniel shouted. "We need to." A voice cut through the noise, steady and clear. "Sir, permission to move." Daniel turned. Emma was already unbuckling her harness, eyes locked on the ridge. Negative, he snapped. Stay where you are. She hesitated for half a second. Then she spoke again, louder. If we don't neutralize that position, we're not getting out of here. A round slammed into the ground inches from their vehicle. Daniel saw Reynolds go down, clutching his arm. Time stretched. Go. Daniel said finally. Emma didn't waste a second. She moved with a speed and confidence that stunned him, signaling to two soldiers who followed her without question. They disappeared into the smoke, advancing toward the ridge Daniel had dismissed only hours earlier. Minutes felt like hours. Gunfire shifted. The pressure eased, just enough for Daniel to reorganize the remaining units. He coordinated evacuation for the wounded, his mind racing with a single thought. If she failed, it was on him. Then the firing from the ridge stopped. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the radio. Position clear, Emma's voice said. You're safe to move. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second, relief flooding through him. The convoy limped back to base battered but alive. Medics rushed in, treating the injured. Equipment was damaged. Morale was shaken. But everyone had made it back. Everyone except Emma. Daniel's heart sank as he scanned the returning vehicles. Where's Lieutenant Carter? He demanded. Reynolds, pale but conscious, nodded toward the far end of the convoy. She's coming. Took a hit covering our exit. Emma emerged moments later, supported by one of the soldiers she'd taken with her. Blood stained her sleeve, but her posture was upright, her expression composed. Daniel walked toward her without thinking. You okay? He asked. She met his eyes. I will be, sir. Something in her tone. No accusation, no pride. Cut deeper than any rebuke could have. Daniel realized, with a clarity that made his chest ache, how close he'd come to losing everything because he hadn't listened. That night, as the base settled into uneasy quiet, Daniel stood alone outside the command tent, replaying the day over and over. His words echoed in his head. Step back, sweetie. He knew he owed her more than an apology. Before the next part continues, if you enjoy realistic, character-driven military stories like this, stories about leadership, mistakes, and unexpected courage, make sure you subscribe to the channel Generals and Truth Stories. Your support helps bring these powerful narratives to life. Daniel didn't yet know how deeply Emma Carter had changed the fate of his unit, or how much more they would face together. But he knew one thing for certain: he would never underestimate her again. The days after the ambush felt heavier than the blast itself. The base moved, breathed, and functioned the same way it always had, but something underneath had shifted. Daniel Harper felt it every time he stepped into the command tent, every time he looked at the map pinned to the wall, every time he caught soldiers glancing toward Lieutenant Emma Carter with a new kind of respect. Emma returned to duty sooner than the medics recommended. Her shoulder was wrapped, her movements slightly restricted, but her focus never wavered. Daniel noticed how soldiers gravitated toward her now. Not loudly, not with hero worship, but with trust. They asked her questions. They waited for her input, and she gave it without ego, without reminding anyone what she had done. That restraint unsettled Daniel more than confidence ever could have. During the next briefing, Daniel paused before assigning teams. He looked up from a map and met Emma's eyes. Lieutenant Carter, he said, I want your assessment. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Expectant, Emma stood. The last attack wasn't random, she said. It was a probe. They tested our response time and our fallback routes. If they hit again, it'll be harder and closer to base. Daniel nodded slowly. Recommendations? We change our patterns, she replied. Shorter patrols, variable timing, and we stop assuming yesterday's safety means tomorrow's. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Make it happen. That single sentence rippled through the unit. It wasn't just an order, it was acknowledgement. Over the next weeks, the unit adapted. Patrols became sharper, smarter. Casualties dropped. Near misses were avoided entirely. Daniel watched Emma work, seeing now what he'd missed before. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply saw the battlefield differently, like a living thing instead of a static map point one night. Long after most of the base had gone quiet, Daniel found Emma alone near the motor pool, checking equipment under the harsh white lights. "You should be resting," he said. She looked up. "So should you, sir." He almost smiled. They stood there for a moment, the hum of generators filling the silence. "I was wrong," Daniel said finally. "About you. About a lot of things." Emma waited. She always did. "I let my assumptions speak louder than your record," he continued. "That nearly got people killed." She considered that. "It didn't," she said. "And we're learning." Daniel met her gaze. "That comment I made. I crossed the line." "Yes," she said simply. "I'm sorry." The word felt heavier than any order he'd ever given. Emma nodded once. "Thank you, sir. No forgiveness speech. No tensión. Just truth." The next Real test came sooner than anyone expected that a distress call crackled through the radio just before dawn. A patrol unit had gone dark beyond the valley, their last transmission fragmented and urgent. Daniel's unit was the closest as they mobilized. Daniel felt the familiar surge of command. But this time, he didn't carry it alone. "We'll split into two elements," he said. "Emma, you take point on recon." "Yes, sir." They moved fast, terrain blurring as adrenaline took over. Smoke rose in the distance. The missing patrol's vehicle lay disabled, riddled with damage. "Ambush zone," Emma said quietly. Same signature as before, but tighter. Gunfire erupted before Daniel could respond. They were surrounded, that Daniel's instincts screamed to pull back, to consolidate. But Emma's voice cut through the chaos again. "There's a narrow ravine to the west," she said. "We can funnel them if we draw fire." Daniel looked at her. For a split second, the memory of his dismissal flashed in his mind. Then he nodded. "Do it." Emma led the maneuver with precision, directing movement, anticipating enemy positions before they revealed themselves. The unit moved like a single organism, every soldier trusting the plan without hesitation. The firefight was brutal but brief. When it ended, the enemy presence had vanished, leaving behind silence and dust. They recovered the missing patrol. Shaken, alive as the sun climbed higher, Daniel surveyed the scene. No fatalities, minimal injuries. Another impossible outcome, achieved through adaptation and trust. Back at base, exhaustion settled in, but so did something else. Pride. That evening, Daniel gathered the unit. "Today could have gone very differently," he said. "It didn't because someone spoke up when it mattered, and because the rest of you listened." His eyes found Emma. "Leadership isn't about rank," he continued. "It's about responsibility. And sometimes it's about knowing when to step back." A few soldiers exchanged glances. Emma remained still, composed. Later that night, Daniel sat alone, writing his report. His words came slower than usual. Weighed down by reflection, he thought about how close he'd come to losing his unit. Not to the enemy, but to his own certainty. How often leadership failed not through cruelty, but through dismissal. Emma had saved more than lives. She'd saved the unit from stagnation, from arrogance. Before deployment ended, Daniel recommended her for advancement. Not as a reward, but as recognition of reality. On their final day at the base, Emma approached him. "Sir," she said, "I've learned a lot here." Daniel nodded. "So have I." They shook hands, firm, respectful. As she walked away, Daniel felt a quiet certainty settle in him. He would carry this lesson forward long after the dust of this place faded from memory. Because leadership wasn't about commanding from above. It was about listening, adapting, and trusting the people beside you, no matter how easily they might be overlooked. And sometimes the strongest voice in a room is the one you almost told to step back. That if this story moved you, if you believe in real leadership, accountability, and untold courage, don't forget to subscribe to the channel Generals and Truth Stories. Every story here is a reminder that truth often arrives from the most unexpected place and changes everything. The mission ended. The lesson didn't.